General Jack Keane joins me now. General, good morning. One official is calling this a moment of crisis. Is that how you see it?
Well, yes, certainly. It's been a crisis for some time with 110,000 troops certainly on the border of Ukraine. A crisis, I may say, actually, completely precipitated by Putin. He has shown his hand now because he's put together a proposal for the United States and NATO to consider, which is absolutely breathtaking in its scope, because he's suggesting reconstructing the security architecture that has existed in Europe since the collapse of the Soviet Union. And by that I'm saying he is demanding there to be no further expansion of NATO whatsoever to include Ukraine, no assistance to Ukraine in terms of military troops activity or arms. And the second proposal is amazing. He is saying that the 14 countries that have joined NATO since 1997, we can no longer put NATO troops into those countries, conduct any military activity, nor can those countries increase their military activity themselves that would potentially threaten Russia. If that was the case, what we're saying, he's rolling back NATO to what it used to be during the Cold War, and it reveals how strongly he is concerned about the former Soviet Union countries now being a part of NATO. Listen, no one's going to agree to that last proposal that I suggested, nor the fact the United States, I don't believe, would agree at all to the fact that NATO cannot be expanded. But Putin certainly is playing hardball here. He precipitated the crisis. He thinks he's got the leverage. And actually, you say, well, why is he doing this? I suspect he believes that there's significant political and social division inside in Europe and also inside the United States. And there is an opportunity here. And when he sees opportunity, he moves quickly on it. And I believe he also thinks he's dealing with a president who will make a concession much easier than he will go to a confrontation. And I believe he clearly intends to take advantage of the United States.
Yeah, it's interesting. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin ordering our warships to stay in the Mediterranean because of those rising tensions. But you know what, General? Even though I think Putin comes across as very aggressive, he's very intuitive, some would argue when it actually comes down to it, he's pretty conservative. And if he goes ahead and tries to invade Ukraine and loses, the result could be significant.
No, I agree with that. Putin is not reckless. He's extremely calculated, but he sees strategic opportunity. He saw it certainly annexing Crimea, and he saw it certainly by putting the military incursion into Syria to stand up and prop up the Assad regime when they were in dire straits and could possibly have been toppled here. And I think he sees opportunity here. The strength of the United States is critical here. We've got to make Putin understand that there's huge cost associated here, and Putin has got to believe that those statements are credible. And that's the concern I have, because I believe in the back of his mind, he thinks he can take advantage of this president and the European leaders. And that's why we're in this crisis.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. General Keane, as always, thank you so much for your time today. Great stuff.